Hi, I'm Chaplain Mark Thomas, and thanks for this opportunity to share with you my testimony about being a chaplain and how God called me. Have a great day.
Good morning, everybody. How you doing? All right. That's right. So, does everyone agree that God is good? All right. I've got really good news. My voice is going away, so my wife's going to be really excited about that. Yeah. Yeah. She's gonna have a great weekend. But I wanted to tell everybody that today is the first day of the rest of your lives. So if you woke up this morning and you're feeling a little bit under the weather like I was, just remember that today's the first day of the rest of your lives. Do we have any visitors today? Who's a visitor today? Okay. Yep. So if you brought a friend, I'm not your sons yet, we're going to go there, but if you brought a friend, would you just stand up and introduce him briefly? Go ahead. Good morning, Rick. Hey, Chuck. All right. Good morning, Larry. All right. Way to go, guys. And Cole is also falls in the other category. He's a son. We're all sons, but good job, Cole, for getting out of bed and getting here. And who else brought their son today? Go ahead. What's your son's name? All right. Good morning, buddy. Way to go. There's another one out there somewhere. All right. Okay. What's your first name again? I'm sorry. Carson. Carson got here this morning. He goes Satellite High. Way to go, Carson. All right, buddy. Okay, just spinning through a couple of announcements. First off, and I wanted to say something. If you helped with the breakfast this morning, would you raise your hand? Where's the guys in the back? Yeah. Okay. Eric Natwick, I know I've said this before, but he does so much for this breakfast, right? He does the sends out the emails, which is a chunk of work. His dad helps with the list, but then he also does the gravy on Fridays, and gets up at 5 a.m. on Saturdays for these things, and just basically does all the work. But anyway, thank you so much for that. And then. Yeah. Okay. And then some other quick announcements is, let's see, tomorrow, if you go to Trinity, Wellsprings Church, or even if you don't, there's a picnic over at Paradise Beach, so the beach picnic, and that's going to be tomorrow around noon at Paradise Beach. And just a reminder, if you plan on going and you live close enough to walk, then that would be great because parking's going to be tight. If you can park over at St. Mark's, which I think is the Methodist church. St. Mark's across the street, a little ways down the street. If you can park over there, there's a shuttle service, okay? So that's tomorrow around noon. I understand Michael has promised not to wear his tee back, so we should be safe on the beach for that. Just board shorts, regular board shorts, Michael. Yeah. Caught a visual there. And yes, I just said that. Oh, awesome. Way to go. Oh, that's going to be great. Yeah. Oh, sorry. That's great. Awesome. Baptized in the ocean. Okay, and a water slide. All right. Very good. Keeps getting better. Nick, go ahead. I got one more. When you're done with announcements, I got one. Okay. All right, no problem. And then next week, I was reminded, is Mother's Day. Don't forget your mommy. All right, so next week's Mother's Day. And then I've been asked if we would just keep D. Alfred. His name is D. Alfred in prayers today. D normally comes to the breakfast, He comes with the guys from Hope Episcopal. Anyway, so he's lost his mom, and today's a special day for him because he'll be delivering her eulogy or giving her eulogy. So if you'd keep Dee Alfred in your prayers today. And that kind of goes along with the next thing. The last point I wanted to make was, if someone is around you who is hurting, reach out to them. There's a lot of people that are very quiet about it. One in particular that, is in my circles, and I had no idea, the extent of this guy's, turmoil. And just turned out that, this individual just happened to be very private about it. And gosh, sometimes you just have to be aware, look for that prompting from the Holy Spirit on that. So be a light to those around you. That's my little message for today. One last announcement from Michael.
Some of you probably heard this. I think often over either this table or this table, there's been a group, Jim Fisher, some of the Satellite Beach, city Satellite Beach officials, councilmen, some of the councilmen, all that time, and Police Chief Jeff Pearson. Well, at that table, there's often been a guy named Mickey Munner, and he's very strongly involved in Satellite Beach United Methodist Church, and was also involved in law firm names. It was Jim Fisher's sponsor. I saw an email from him. I think I did it longer than I did. And I've not seen them. There could be the services today.
Okay.
2 o'clock tomorrow. Okay, so we probably had Satellite Beach United. Yeah.
And what's his name?
His name is Mickey Munner. But
Mickey Munner.
you learn about relationships and how that kind of friendship, neighborhood relationships often result in God using them. Well, Jim Fisher is very outward about, he was Mickey Munner and a neighbor who involved him in his church, and eventually Jimmy became part of our church, and then recently moved to Wellsprings. So I don't know this very well, but obviously a great example of the kind of thing we celebrate.
Yeah.
And he's now in the Lord.
All right, so we'll keep Mickey Munner in our prayers too, along with Dee and his family, right? So, okay, and without further ado, today we've got Mark Thomas, who is a chaplain at Patrick Air Force Base and actually runs the chaplaincy. It's a new word for me, chaplaincy. Did I do that right? So runs the chaplaincy at Patrick Air Force Base. And the connection is that that Trinity is looking for ways to, obviously have an impact outside of the walls of the church. And so the idea being to have a connection with the families over at the Air Force Base. And we're going to hear more about it. But anyway, Mark Thomas is, it's Major Mark Thomas, soon to be, I think, Lieutenant Colonel at some point in the near future. And I'll let him tell you all about it. So thank you, Mark.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be with you this morning. And let me say thank you for the breakfast. I cook grits at the house, but they don't taste as good as yours. And my wife cooks great bacon, but whoever brought out let me just give 18 thumbs up to whoever brought out the second pan of bacon that was well done and crispy. You could just put that in a doggy bag for me, and I'll take that home with me, and we'll call it even. But thank you. I know I got a Navy and an Army guy in here. Any Marines? Okay. Oh, they're right up front. Okay, thank you. Let's close in prayer. I'm done. I'll see y'all later. You probably heard this before, but, we love each other, all four branches. We don't necessarily get along sometimes, but, it's all about communication. For any of you who are married, you understand what I'm saying. Just use the simple term, secure the building. And the Army will post guards around the place. The Navy will turn out the lights and lock the doors. The Marines will kill everybody inside and set up a headquarters. And the Air Force will take out a 5-year lease with an option to buy. So, we all do things a little differently. But thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you this morning. Just a few moments. And I just want to share a little bit of my story and how I got here and really how God's involved in the middle of all that. So I was born in Pensacola, Florida. My dad was a Southern Baptist minister, and he was actually born in Palatka. He was raised in Palatka on a truck farm. So I spent was born in Florida, moved to North Carolina. He got called back to North Carolina ministry. So I spent my summers every week in August. We would come down before school started, visiting my grandparents at Palatka and seeing my aunt and uncles in Tampa and Orlando. You know, the wonderful time of the year to be in Florida in August. But through that experience, coming back and forth, North Carolina was home. Growing up as a child, my mom and dad asked me, son, what do you want to do? And I said, well, because my dad was a Southern Baptist minister, we didn't have a lot of money, but people would always give him a little bit of a couple extra rows in their garden. And so he would go out and plant, or they'd say, preacher, the corn's in. And so he would like to get up early in the morning before it got hot and go get the corn or pick the beans or whatever it was. And so I said to my mom and dad, what do you want to do? I said, well, I think I'll probably either be a preacher or a farmer because that's all I know. Well, how prophetic those words were to some degree. The Lord called me in high school to ministry. And I remember walking the aisle and talking to my dad, and we prayed. And then later in the week when we talked, by that time, Satan had convinced me that I was just concerned about people. And so I went on my way. I graduated from high school. I did not want to go to college. And so I started working at a furniture factory in North Carolina. And then I realized after a couple of years, or actually a couple of weeks, that, there was a guy across from me who had been working there for probably 10 years, and he was making about $50 or $60 more than I was a week. And I thought, wow, I need to do something. And so I joined the Air Force and got sent off to Alaska, to Eielson Air Force Base in Fairbanks. I had a friend who joined a year, and he got sent to Seymour Johnson in North Carolina. So I can remember filling out my dream sheet thinking, okay, maybe I'll go as far as South Carolina. This thing will work out. And I still remember looking at that paper going, AK, and going through, it's not Arkansas, it's not Alabama, it's not Arizona. And then realizing it was Alaska. But God really has a plan. And so was in Alaska for 18 months, 2 summers and 1 winter by his design, thank the Lord. And then got stationed at the Air Force Academy for my last 2 years. And it was there at the Air Force Academy so I hadn't had a car in 18 months, and I bought a Subaru station wagon. And I was driving down Academy Boulevard, and there was this little Southern Baptist church, Pikes Peak Park Baptist Church. And the pastor was from Alabama. My Sunday school teacher was from South Carolina, and there were people from Alabama and Florida. So you can understand already it was an SEC church. There were people who didn't sit with each other on certain Sundays when football teams were playing. But, it just had a Southern flair. I could understand everything they were saying. They could decipher what I was saying, and so it worked out well. But the Lord called again while I was there. Actually, I was filling in one Sunday, teaching the Sunday school lesson, and it was Palm Sunday. And it was out of the Gospel of John where they had blindfolded Jesus and pulled his beard and hit him and said, you said you're a prophet. Now tell us which one of us did it. And it was that time the Lord sort of, spoke to my heart again. He said, now, Jesus has done this for you. What are you going to do for him? And so I remember that morning, and I called back to North Carolina. So there's a 2-hour time difference, and so it was right before worship was starting. And I remember talking to my dad and said, God is calling me again. And we had prayer on the phone. And I just remember praying, Lord, whatever I do this time, when I try to run, don't let me run. I already did it a couple of years ago, and I just didn't want to do that again. And so it was Easter Sunday. I went and talked to the pastor the next Sunday. I came forward and I said, okay, Lord, I surrender. I'm going to do what you want me to do. And so a couple of months later, about 9 months later, I got out of the Air Force. I went back to North Carolina to pursue education and started. Got there. I'm 4 years older than everybody else, but the Lord worked all that out, and ended up meeting my wife, who is an attorney. She doesn't practice now, so I don't don't win very many arguments at the house. So, so the Lord called me into ministry. And so, got out of college, went to seminary, went to a Baptist church, was on staff as youth and education director, and then got called to a small country church in North Carolina, just an hour north of Wilmington, on the coast. And so that's sort of where my Air Force story begins. So my wife was an attorney. She worked for the state. She was an assistant district attorney, a prosecutor or persecutor, depending on your run-in with the law before. But she always had a dream of us having a family and her being able to stay at home. And she knew that what she was making probably double what I was, and she knew that probably wouldn't be able to be sustained. But the Lord started laying on my heart about the Air Force. And if you've been in the military, about every 3 years you get the itch to move. So I'd been at the church a couple of years and just sort of got this itch. I'm thinking, maybe there's something out there. But the ministry was going good, and the people loved us. It was a good country church. And so the Lord laid on my heart, maybe you ought to go over to Seymour Johnson Air Force Base and talk to one of the chaplains and see what it is. And I will be the first to tell you, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. And so after the Lord did that a couple of times, and there were 4 hospitals in the region, and they all had heart programs, which for heart attacks. And about every man in my church smoked a cigarette. So we had quite a few heart attacks in my line of work that day. And so I was just going around. One day I got a letter. It was the Wednesday before Easter, and there was a letter. And I sat down, and I was having lunch at the house, and I'm opening my stuff, and I'm reading it. And it was from the Air Force Recruiting Service. I thought, well, this is kind of odd. What's this? And it was from the Air Force Chaplaincy saying, we're looking for chaplains. Are you interested? If so, contact so-and-so and so. So my wife came home, and I fixed supper for her that night. Actually, we were having a Monday, Thursday service, so we didn't have anything that Wednesday night. And we're eating, and I said, the mail came today. And I put the mail over there, and she saw that letter because I'd been talking to her about it. She said, what's this? I said, it's a letter from the Lord. I hear him, but he had to put it on paper for me. So I said, okay. So we started the process. So as we were starting the process, actually in North Carolina, the census results had just come out. And the census results showed that the 4-county area where my wife worked as an assistant district attorney had grown, and they were going to have another judge. They needed another judge. And so the Bar Association got together, and they take names forward, and they take it up, and they vote on who they want to be the judge, or who they're going to pass on to the governor to appoint. And so here we were, feeling like the Lord was calling me in the Air Force, going this direction, and my wife was very good at what she did. And so she was being considered to be a judge. And we're just praying, Lord, how is this working? It's pretty simple. You sent me a letter of what I'm supposed to do. And now this great opportunity for my wife, who would be a very good judge and hold people to the intent and the spirit of the law. Lord, what's going on here? And so we prayed, and we just got a peace. The Lord said, just go. And so we went. And so within a 48-hour window, we found out the bar, the bar told her that her name was not going to go forward to the governor. And within 48 hours later, I got a call saying that I had been accepted to come on active duty to the Air Force. So, for us, it was one of those things where we said, yes, Lord, we will go. But I said earlier, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. So the people in the little area there, Chinquapin, were good. They would bring you vegetables fresh out of the garden. They'd invite you over to eat. They even called one day and said, y'all like fish? And my wife said, yes. And I said, honey, now do you know what they were saying? She said, no. They said that we like fish. They were going to bring us some. I said, honey, they're going to bring us fish. But they're going to bring us fish that still has the head and the tail and the scales on. She said, and so she hit star 69 and called them back. Said, we like to eat fish, but we like it when it's already cooked. Is that okay? And they said, yeah, we won't bring you any. So, we're learning. We're trying to get there. So I was having a conversation with the Lord, going to one of the hospitals. And I said, Lord, I know you want me to go in the Air Force. I know all the doors are open, but I really just I don't think I can leave these people. They're just so good. And I think this is really where we're supposed to be. And as I was praying, to the Lord, just talking, I had a preaching tape in John Maxwell. And so I'm just going down the road, and so I just sort of had my prayer, and I was like, I'm amen. What's your answer to that, Lord? Debate that with me. And so John Maxwell goes, and the number 6 characteristic of the Apostle Paul's life was his direction in life changed, but his calling never did. And I went 4 or 5 miles down the road, and I thought, there is no way that I just heard from what exact. And so, it was a cassette tape. So, you had to take it out, push it back to go back. And sure enough, and I said, okay, Lord, I'm not going to fight with you anymore. I'm just going to go. And so, as a nice send-off present, September of 1999, my wife and I, her brother was getting married in England. And so we bought tickets and went over to England. Any of you were here in 1999, September 1999? Hurricane Floyd was coming right towards Florida. It got about 50 or 60, 70, 90 miles out there and took a little jog north. It came in at high tide around Wilmington. Chinkapin was about 45 minutes from Wilmington. It came in at high tide, so all the rivers were backed up, dropped 10 inches of rain as it went in, and then everything had to flow back. The parsonage that we lived in was flooded. I remember calling them because my dad, who was alive at that point, was going to go preach for me that Sunday morning. And I called because we had been watching it on the news, and my mom said, son, it's all right. They went in and took your wedding portrait off the wall. And they had closed in the garage to make a family room, and then you went 4 steps up into the house. And I'm thinking, why did they have to take it off the wall? Because the water, so it was one of these 50 or 500-year floods. And so we came back with less than 2 weeks before the movers were coming to pack our stuff up. And the church had not been flooded, so they moved our stuff out of the parsonage and put it in the fellowship, or not the fellowship hall, but the educational wing of the church until we could get the packers to come and move. And I was like, okay, Lord, I'm really going this time. I'm not looking back. And so we did. We went. But that community, it was such a hard thing to leave. People you spent 3 or 4 years with, they've just been devastated. But the Lord had called us to leave. And so we left. And we've been back many times, and they're still good folks. So somebody asked me earlier where we've been. So we started off in Arizona, then went to Washington, D.C. I spent 3 years at Arlington National Cemetery from 2002 to 2005. And then went to Okinawa, Japan. Went to California at Vandenberg Air Force Base, which is where we launch satellites and rockets on the West Coast. Then down in Biloxi, Mississippi for a couple of years. Last year in Montgomery, Alabama. And then we got here in June about a year ago to Patrick. So it's really rare that you get the opportunity to be at 2 space bases, but really the 2 launching facilities for the Air Force. So we just, we know that God's in control and He's in charge. So as I passed out to you as we went around, because I'll talk about this in a little while, but I think it was last Monday night we had a launch. So every launch that we have that takes place here at the Cape, the chapel team at Patrick, we do these launch prayers. And so we go over to the operations center and we pass these launch prayers out. We got a little bag of candy that we take and give to folks. The people are in there. So we're what they consider sort of non-essential personnel. We don't have anything to do with the launch. So they make an announcement about when there's 60 minutes left on the launch clock that all non-essential personnel are supposed to leave. So we go over before and we have some fellowship with the folks. But you would just be surprised, and I just want to give you testimony, how many people say, yeah, I don't really care about the candy, but can you give me a card? Yeah, I keep these all the time. And so then we get grief if it's been delayed 2 or 3 days. They're like, hey, you need to get another chaplain praying for this. But your prayers aren't working. But but eventually it goes, and we claim credit for it when it does. So, but we just hear so many. You hear sometimes so much negative about the military and religion. I just wanted to let you know, this goes on at every launch, and so we're there, and it's not something And if you watch 60 Minutes last week, they were in the 60 Minutes did about a 15-minute piece, and they had some video from the launch center. Really, we're not there to be in the limelight or to get our names. We're just there to do this because it affects people. And there are some people who say, no, I don't care for one, and that's fine. But we used to have a saying in the Air Force as for chaplains, we were to be visible reminders of the holy. And so regardless of their faith, when they walk by, on my uniform or on our chaplain's uniforms is the cross. And so they see the cross. What they do with the cross is their decision. What they do with Jesus is their decision. But they see the cross. And we are there as visible reminders of the holy. So what does a chaplain do? Well, we preach. We counsel people. The thing that chaplains give people in the Air Force that they only get from one other person, and that's a lawyer or the JAG, is complete confidentiality. When somebody comes in our office and they're talking to us, they have complete confidentiality. So that means if they've done something wrong or they're thinking about doing something wrong, they have a place that they can come and unpack that and get it off of their chest. Excuse me. Now, we're going to work with them to sort of help lead them in the right direction. Very few people come in and say, I want to tell you the 17 things I've done and walk out. They come in and say, I want to tell you the 17 things I've done and I'm having a problem with that. And what do I do? Can you give me some advice? Can you help me with that? And so, that's what we're there for. And so we get that opportunity, and we get that opportunity with people who have faith from different faith backgrounds, and we get that opportunity with people who have no faith background. It just breaks your heart sometimes when you hear people's story. And so we were told the other day, I think the Air Force is at the lowest that it's ever been personnel-wise. I think it's maybe 310,000 people in the whole Air Force. And so, and we've cut, and all the branches are that way. We're all getting in slim. But, while we've cut people, the requirements just continue to exponentially explode. And technology helps that, but it doesn't meet all the things. And so there are people working long hours. And so Bo was asking me, we're talking. And so we think about, when I think about that, or sometimes I think about that in the context of the military, but also think about that in the context of civilians. So, at Patrick, the total number of military would be about 3,900. You add in about 4,700 dependents. And then we think about the civilians. So you've got two separate groups of civilians, about 2,100 and another 2,900, which adds up to a total of somewhere about 13,500 people. That are related there. And then, then there's a community of retirees that come and, I was talking with one of the pharmacists there at the med group, and he was saying he was going to Japan. I said, oh, what base? He said, I'm going to Misawa. I said, well, how many pharmacists are going to be on staff? He goes, me and one more. I was like, oh, that's cool. He says, yeah, that'll beat me and the other 12 that I have here. There's just so many retirees in this area that come and use the facilities. There's two of the guys over there that are always hogging the machines at the gym right there. But no, I'm just joking. But, just the pharmacy. I mean, there's the pharmacy there and there's a satellite pharmacy. And that thing just continually goes all around. And rightfully so, because they've served our nation. So religious freedom, what does that mean? I think about our Constitution, and I've had people ask me, and, because I have a belief, I have a faith. And sometimes people don't want to come talk to a chaplain because they've had bad experiences when they were younger. Or they think the first thing we're going to do is take a big Bible and hit them over the head with it when they come in. Now, that's what some people need, to be honest with you. They need to be hit with the Bible when they come in. But, when I read the scriptures, Jesus tried to, a lot of times Jesus met people's physical needs, and then he was able to meet their spiritual needs. And so when I think about chaplains, we're there trying to meet people's physical needs so we can open the door and have that relationship with them and meet their spiritual needs. And so Paul and I were talking before we started this morning. And so, used to be in the military, when you were in the military, you lived on base and you lived there and you were your own community. To help cut, so the Air Force did away with, they didn't do away with military housing, but they did away with running it. So they don't have as many folks in CE or LRS. So now they've privatized that. So these houses down here at Pelican Coast and all the houses on base is run by a privatized company. And then they hire their own people to make sure it's maintained and stuff like that. And, people that were smart realized, hey, I get a housing allowance. I go buy a house. I can put some in, I can have some equity in that. And so a lot of our folks out of this 13,000, they don't live within a 2-mile radius of the base. They live down in Melbourne or Cocoa Beach, or they live over in Vieira. And so when they live there, the last thing they want to do on Sunday morning is get up and drive back over here and come back on base. And so, that's why our relationship with the local churches, and, we just appreciate you guys so much, because people want to have a place. Some people just want to get as far away from a uniform as they can. And that makes perfectly good sense. I remember when I was going to commissioned officers training, when I'd left the civilian pastorate and come in, they're riding us and we've got to have inspections and running in the morning. And man, they wanted us to run for 30 minutes. And I thought those people were crazy. I was like, you can physically hurt somebody by making them run for 30 minutes. But they didn't buy my argument. But that was a long time ago. But, I chased that rabbit. I forgot where I was. Oh, yeah. But I just remember one day at the end of training, I had my car, and I told my suite mate, we shared a room, I said, I'm going off base to get some Mexican night. Do you want any? He goes, no, I'm fine. I was like, okay. I just need to get away from uniforms for a while. Get away from short hair. Just go back out where people, I don't have to say yes, ma'am, and no, sir all the time, even though that's what my parents raised me to do. But, when I think about religious freedom, I just relate one final story to you. So years ago when I was at Okinawa in Kadena Air Force Station in Okinawa, Japan, there was a pilot who went to one of the worship services. He was in one of the squadrons that I was a chaplain for. And he was a strong believer. He was an F-15 pilot. And he was struggling with getting out because he just, the military was changing, has continued to change. And he had talked to me about it a little bit, and so in our talking, he said, I talked to my squadron commander. The squadron commander had been a Thunderbird pilot. He was a strong believer, and he was talking to him, and he said, whatever decision you make, he said, you need to pray about it. He said, but the other thing you need to think about is, I know that sometimes it seems dark in our world, that not everybody's a believer, not everybody, lives the way that we believe they should live or lives the lifestyle. He said, but just remember, if God's leading you to get out, then that's what you need to do. He said, but when you get out, that's one light that's gone out of this darkness. So several years ago, when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was getting ready to get overturned, they basically sent a letter out to an email to the chaplains and said, we're getting ready to overturn this policy. And we understand that you may have a problem with that. But you can either stay in, accept the policy, or you can get out. So some chaplains got out. A good friend of mine worked at the chief of chaplain's office up in D.C., and in talking to him a few years ago, he said, we know that there are denominations who are just waiting for Don't Ask, Don't Turn to get overturned so they can put people in to become chaplains. So to become a chaplain, I'm a Southern Baptist. I had to send some paperwork up to the North American Mission Board, and they said, okay, we endorse him as a chaplain, and then that paperwork goes over to the Air Force, the Department of Defense, and they rack and stack them, and they say, okay, this person will be good. And so, and so sometimes people will say, well, chaplain, why do you stay in? If the environment is turning, let's, just say less the way you would like to see it, why do you stay in? And one, the Lord was the one who sent me a couple of letters and a couple of thumps in the back of the head and said, this is the way I want you to go. And so I figure I'll probably get an email or something else from him one day saying, okay, I've had it. You've had enough. But, we are to be as a believer, I am to be a light. And so my other chaplains, they are too. We may not all agree theologically, but if the Bible-believing chaplains were to leave the Air Force or to leave the military, then when people needed to talk to someone, who would they talk to when they needed that? And so, I just want to sort of throw that out there. We're all different along those lines, but just let you sort of know where I came from or come from. So I think that's it. I'm going to open it up. I forgot to bring my attorney for the question and answer period. So, but if you have any questions, please. Yes, sir.
Well, I really appreciate your the last part, because many of us have wondered what it would like to be in your situation. And so I guess I want to ask a clarifying question in the second one, where you kind of give your suggestions for us. So the Air Force and all the services chaplains has told them that this is the policy. We need you to do this job. If you were asked your own private beliefs, can you still share them as a Southern Baptist, as an evangelical Christian, or would you be in violation of your commitment to the Air Force if somebody asked you and you gave the reasons why you had a traditional view of sexuality? I got to follow up after.
Yes, sir. And I'm sorry I lost my train of thought in that. So the thing that protects chaplains is their endorsement. So I'm endorsed by the Southern Baptist Convention. So my endorsers have said, here are the things you can do and can't do. So don't let me get away from your question, but I forgot. So the Southern Baptist Convention says that you cannot marry two folks of the same sex. Okay? If I wanted to, if I were to do that, they would pull my endorsement and I would no longer be a chaplain under them. I would have to go try to find somewhere else. So in a counseling situation or a setting where someone comes in, or say we're sitting around a table in the chow hall and we're talking about things, I can say what I feel. You know what I'm saying? I can say what I believe. That's a better terminology to use. I can say that. I'm not, how I say that and where I say it and with the veracity that I say it probably goes a long way. Regardless of who I don't want to speak bad about the commander-in-chief, because they're the commander-in-chief. I mean, we've all had bosses that we didn't particularly like everything they told us to do, but sometimes we had to do that. But putting it away from the commander-in-chief, it's a respect thing. So yes, I could say what I wanted to without betraying that. Am I answering the question?
I'm going to say something you can comment on. I guess it just seems to me that I've never thought of military chaplains as people, pioneers ahead of me in terms of ministry leadership. I've always respected the ministry you do and know that, I've always been a little envious you get paid without having to do stewardship.
Well, but the Lord still knows. Yeah, I got you now.
But you don't have to do that.
Yeah, I got you.
Fundraise and all
right.
But it seems to me that in this era we're in, some of us may be too fearful and not recognize that we we are going to be able to be distinctively Christian. We've got the First Amendment, and we are going to be able to be faithful. We just have to learn how to accept the fact that we may have more than one allegiance. I mean, with you, it's the U.S. government. You've taken a vow, and us as citizens to uphold the law. So it may be that pastors and others can learn from you all how it is to be faithful with who you are, being distinctive, without having to either totally agree with it or to quit.
Yes, sir.
Or be escaped.
And I think about the Apostle Paul sometimes. What a pluralistic society he was in. There were just people from all over the place, with strange beliefs for that day. But yet he still ministered to them. He still had conversations with them, still probably got into arguments with them. They got mad, tried to kill him. But I think you're right. I mean, I think that's for all of us. We do have, as American citizens, we have the right to free speech or our beliefs, and to be able to say that. What we see a lot of times, I think, in the media are the far extremes of both sides of that. Or the people who want everybody, don't like anybody, or the people that, the church in, is it Missouri or whatever, that protest at the military funerals and things like that. It's just, I can remember, so my first assignment at Davis-Monthan in Tucson, Arizona, there was a repatriation, or they had found enough remains of of someone's remains in Vietnam to identify him now because of DNA, and they were bringing him home. And I can remember being at the funeral home, and this is pre 9/11, and being there, and I was doing the graveside service, and the family, and this was 99 or 2000, and this would have been from the late 60s or early 70s, and the family was concerned that there were going to be protesters because he had served in Vietnam. And just remembering being with them, and just we're not sure if somebody's going to come here and protest, because that's what had happened to him and had been relayed to them when they got back. So, and just being able to be there and to help them, reassure them, if there is, it'll be taken care of, or they won't be allowed in. So I'm sort of chasing a rabbit. Sorry about that. Yes, sir.
Expound on your experience in Arlington. I just can't imagine the honor.
It was an honor, and I think probably, he asked me to expound on my experience at Arlington National Cemetery. So, I'd just been in the Air Force as a chaplain for 2.5 years, and when you go to Arlington, and you see and I don't want to. This isn't a negative term, but the pomp and circumstance, the dignity of it, the manicured lawns, the white. You think, wow, this is amazing. And when you first get there, you think, man, people are here to hear me. They're going to hear what I say. And when you realize what they're there for are the tall young men, the bugle, the firing of the volley, and then you realize, okay, I just don't want to mess this up. And so what we would do is we would get the information usually about 2 weeks ahead of time of when a service was scheduled. And we would call the family, we'd get to talk with them and find out if there was any Bible verses that were significant or something like that. And so we had about 3 to 4 minutes at a graveside to do our thing. And then you realized, okay, I don't want to be the chaplain that they remember that went on for a half an hour in the either freezing or the hot. You want to work in with it. And so it was an opportunity, as just to brush up against history and sort of walk on hallowed ground. I mean, I grew up watching Robert Conrad and Baba Black Sheep, Pappy Boynton, when I was a young man, and I went to Pappy Boynton's graveside there at Arlington, where it is, to be able to see, because by the time, so usually it's about a 3 or 4 week process from when somebody dies before they can get a service scheduled at Arlington. So what you came to realize was, but by the time they got to Arlington, a lot of the intense grieving was over, and this was a celebration. a celebration of their service to the nation and their military career, and the parents or the grandparent, now their grandchildren were there, and getting to see it. And so I think that it'll be the highlight of my Air Force career of having been there, and so having said that, I was trying to think. The captain that replaced me, I left and went to Okinawa, and I was looking online. The captain that replaced me a couple of weeks, about 2 months afterwards, Brent Scowcroft passed away, and he had been an Air Force officer. He was in the Reagan White House. And so they had an article about it on the Air Force website, and I'm looking, and he is the captain that replaced me is standing there, and he was the escort for Margaret Thatcher. And so, to the graveside, and so he escorted her out, and I was thinking, man, I missed it by that much. But so I can see I'm getting ready to get the hook from left field here. Okay, so.
One more question.
Okay, we'll do 2 and we'll call it a day. Yes, sir. I have a cell phone that my wife does not like me to bring to the table. So yes, in a way we are. We have what we call a duty chaplain roster, where there's going to be 4 of us. One of us just deployed, so there's 3 of us. And so we take it for 2 weeks at a time. And so, it's with us. And if they need something at the command post, if somebody passes away or, somebody needs counseling in the middle of the night, they call the command post and they'll ring us. So we do get a little break, but I really am on call. If the general needs anything or somebody else does, they can call and I'll pick up. Yes, sir.
Who's eligible to be buried at Arlington?
I think it's arlington.org. I think you can Google that. But I think anyone who has served with an honorable discharge, there are several types. There's a general discharge, an honorable discharge, a less than honorable discharge. Because I had some friends of mine that would come up, and their parents came and they said, we want to talk about, what's going to happen. And then there would be, and there were some people that I did internments, or not internments, for people who had cremations, and they'd only served 2 years. But I think it's anybody with an honorable. I think the starting point is service and an honorable discharge. So one time I was preaching, and I was in my second of 3 points, and my wife was about 3 rows from the back, and I looked at her, and she looked really confused. And I thought, well, I didn't do a good enough job, so I'm going to circle back over this point and preach it again, and explain it. And so I circled back over the second point, and then I looked up again. She was even more confused. So I said, okay, it's time to move on to the third point. So hopefully I haven't confused any of you this morning, because I have that knack from time to time. So thank you for allowing me, and thank you for the bacon, and I'll be back there to get it in just a minute.
There was one other question, and that was, is there anything in particular that we can pray for as a church with regard to the chaplaincy, or you?
I would just, your prayers, period. Just, if you remember us, and just pray for the chaplains, and to give us wisdom. We have several situations that are going on where people are, guys gave me the cross to hold, to have while I was preaching, and that's really what it's about. If you just ask that we would be hidden in the cross every day, and in the shadow of the cross,
Need that.
speak out of that and work out of that, then we're good.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. And then along those lines, some of you remember Chris Parsons, and I understand he's going to be interned at Arlington in June, beginning of June. Is that correct? So that's pretty neat. And I know that there may be some people from our area going up there for that process. But anyway, so just to wrap up in a couple things. Number one, and thank you so much, Mark. That was awesome. We want to pray for D. Alfred, okay, and what he's going through today. We've also got the Mutter family, and then also the Dennison family. Jonathan Dennison's in the back here. He will be putting today's session on YouTube. You'll find it on YouTube, by the way. But his mom's going through a difficult time health-wise, and so that's just something that we want to continue to keep in prayer for with him, with the Dennison family. And the last thing, Carson Thomas, would you come up here for just a second? Okay. So it occurred to me, come on up. What grade are you in? He's in 10th grade at Satellite High. And so Carson, through his own accord, his own initiative now, has chosen to become baptized tomorrow. Exactly. Recently was confirmed. Bob's been his mentor through the confirmation process, but now is just taking that next step with the outward expression of his allegiance to, Jesus Christ. So we would just like lift him up in some clapping right now. So. Way to go, man. That's leadership right there. So anyway, next month we'll do it all again. I totally forgot who our speaker is. We've got speakers lined up right through till September, but I just, for the life of me, cannot remember next month. But I'm sure it'll be great. So see you then. Thank you.